We just arrived at a very specific spot in the open ocean. And while this might look just like a completely random spot in the middle of nowhere, we are actually sitting right above the deepest point in the entire ocean, the Mariana Trench. And we're about to take a trip down to the bottom. I hope you're good at holding your breath. We first enter the epipelagic zone, also known as the sunlight zone. And despite what a lot of bad channels will tell you, the ocean here is actually just normal. The trench doesn't somehow project a terrifying aura all the way up to the surface. The top layer of the water is just normal water, and there'll be normal fish and normal plankton. You wouldn't even know you were floating right above the deepest spot on the entire planet. Realistically, most ocean life doesn't even dive deeper than this. You won't see any orcas or great whites or any sort of normal fish going far past the epipelagic. But obviously, we aren't here to look at normal fish. We're here to go deeper. As you drop past 200 meters, you enter the mesopelagic zone, also known as the Twilight zone. And even though this is around 2% of the depth of the ocean, 90% of the sunlight has already faded away. And while the darkness is definitely unsettling, dropping down into the Twilight zone creates an even worse problem: the water itself. Water is incredibly heavy, and when you're hundreds of meters down, you have thousands of tons of water sitting directly on top of you. But the tricky thing about underwater pressure is that it doesn't just push down on your head like a heavy backpack. Because water is a fluid, it pushes against you from every single angle at the exact same time. It pushes your sides, your back, your legs, and your chest. So before we go any deeper, you can't just be wearing some swim trunks you got at Walmart. You need to put on this $1.3 million atmospheric diving suit. Let's hope it works. For the animals that actually live down here, the pressure isn't as big of a deal. They evolved to handle it. Their bodies are mostly made of water, and since water doesn't really compress from other water, they don't get crushed. Down here, you'll see viperfish, vampire squid, and lots of unique jellyfish which are especially good at resisting water pressure because of how squishy they are. But you didn't get a $1.3 million diving suit to go, wow, look, a jellyfish. You're here to go down. To go any deeper than this though, this $1.3 million diving suit isn't even going to cut it anymore. You'll need this $37 million full ocean depth Titanic submersible. At 1,000 meters down, you cross into the bathypelagic zone, better known as the midnight zone. And here, it's pitch black. You cannot see anything. If you turned off your submarine's headlights, you wouldn't even be able to see your own hand pressed against the glass. But if you sit in the dark with me for just a little bit, you'll actually see something. Light, but not from the sun. Since the sun can't reach this deep, the animals here just started making their own light. This is bioluminescence, and in the midnight zone, tons of animals have it. You have anglerfish with glowing lures on their head, jellyfish that light up like fireworks, and tiny shrimp that spit glowing blue chemicals into the water to distract predators. But these animals aren't using it to see where they're going. When humans are in the dark, we turn on a flashlight so we can see what's around us. But in the deep ocean, things like the infamous anglerfish turn on their flashlight to get things close to them and that. But don't be scared. Anglerfish aren't a real threat to us, since they're actually only around a foot or two long. But something else lives down here. The giant squid. And even though many people think these guys are fake, they're completely real and are over 40 feet long as the longest squid in the entire world. They can also reach up to 800 pounds and… oh wow, a sperm whale just ate that one. Yes, sperm whales dive all the way up from the surface down to the bottom of the midnight zone just to eat giant squids. If you ever see a sperm whale at the surface, check its face for scars. Those are from the same squids we're seeing down here. But we're going even deeper than this, somewhere where even the sperm whales wouldn't be able to reach. And as you pass 4,000 meters, we enter what should be the final zone in the ocean. There's a massive misconception about what the Mariana Trench actually is. Most people use the words deep ocean and the trench interchangeably, as if the entire bottom of the ocean is just one big trench. But that isn't how the Earth works. The Mariana Trench is an actual, physical crack in the Earth's crust. For the majority of the planet, the ocean floor sits at around 4,000 to 5,000 meters deep. That flat, muddy bottom covers over half of the Earth's surface. That's the actual bottom of the ocean. The Mariana Trench is a tectonic fault line where two massive plates of the Earth's crust are crashing into each other, and one is being shoved under the other. This creates a massive canyon that plunges straight down into the crust. So everything you just swam through for the last 4,000 meters, that was just the normal open ocean. The actual rim of the trench doesn't even begin until you hit the regular seafloor. We'll have to drive our submarine over the edge of an underwater cliff to actually reach the trench. We've now entered the abyssopelagic zone, or simply the abyss. This is the zone that spans from 4,000 meters down to the normal seafloor. And if you're terrified of giant sea monsters, this is the zone you need to worry about, because this is where deep sea gigantism hits its absolute peak. Down here, you'll find the giant phantom jelly, a jellyfish with ribbon-like tentacles that stretch over 30 feet long. You find massive sea spiders, and you find the colossal squid, a squid a bit shorter than the giant squid, but somehow twice its weight. They have hooks instead of normal tentacle suckers, and are usually just sitting completely motionless, waiting for something to grab, even including other smaller colossal squids. Fortunately, colossal squids usually only live in the Antarctic, and the Mariana Trench lies below the Pacific. The abyss is the end of the line for gigantism, because where we're going next, even the giant monsters will die. Actually, if you even just have bones down there, you're pretty much dead too. At 5,000 meters down, the pressure outside your submarine is over 500 times greater than the pressure at the surface. Your titanium hull is doing a lot of heavy lifting right now just to keep you alive. But what would actually happen if it failed? What if a microscopic flaw in the metal finally gave way, or your glass viewport cracked? If a submarine breaks at 5,000 meters, drowning isn't even an option. The water pressure is so unimaginably high that if the hull breached, the ocean immediately forces its way inside the submarine at thousands of miles per hour. The air inside your cabin would be compressed so fast that it would trigger a physics phenomenon called adiabatic healing. When a gas is compressed that rapidly, the temperature spikes instantly. For a fraction of a second, the air inside your submarine would become hotter than the surface of the sun. The air would literally ignite. You wouldn't drown. You'd be incinerated and crushed simultaneously, in less time than it takes for your brain to even process the sound of the glass cracking. Your nervous system literally isn't fast enough to register the pain. You just cease to exist. This actually almost happened to the first people who ever reached the bottom of the Mariana Trench. In 1960, the first two people to travel down there heard a massive cracking sound echo through the vessel when they reached the deep abyssal zone. One of the outer plexiglass window panels had cracked. Fortunately, the actual pressure sphere still remained intact and the submarine survived. Once you drop past 6,000 meters, you have officially entered the Mariana Trench. You're now in the hadal zone. The name Hadal comes from Hades, the Greek underworld, and there's a reason. This is not the zone for chaotic battles between giant squids and sperm whales. This is not the zone for giant floating jellyfish. The ecosystem just stops. For the first 6,000 meters of the ocean, animals evolved bizarre strategies to hunt, to hide, and to dominate their environment. They thrived. But in the hadal zone, nobody is dominating anything. The trench is completely different. Animals down here are basically just trying to endure. The pressure is now over 1,000 times the surface pressure. The temperature is hovering at around 34 degrees Fahrenheit. The walls of the trench are steep and barren. This is the most extreme environment on the planet, and because it's so extreme, normal biology just doesn't work down here anymore. Any video that claims the megalodon, the 50-foot prehistoric shark, never actually went extinct and somehow just swam down into the Mariana Trench to hide, was lying to you. Megalodon would have died thousands of meters above this. As I mentioned earlier, deep sea gigantism stops at the abyss. Once you enter the trench, the extreme pressure and the complete lack of food will kill anything that enters here. So, what actually lives down here? At 8,000 meters down, you look out your window and finally spot a fish. It's the Mariana snailfish. It has no scales, no armor, and no sharp teeth. It's completely translucent, and its body is softer than jelly. If you brought it up to the surface, it would literally melt into a puddle of goo. This is the deepest living fish ever discovered. So how is this thing not imploding? It doesn't have a swim bladder, the gas-filled organ most fish use to float, because a gas pocket would instantly collapse. Its bones are barely even bones. They're soft cartilage that bends instead of breaking. Its entire body is filled with a specialized fluid that matches the density of the water outside. The pressure doesn't crush the snailfish because there's nothing rigid to crush. The pressure just passes right through it. Being squishy is genuinely the best survival trait you could possibly have in the deepest part of the ocean. But what could this fish even be eating? Nothing else can survive here. If you shine your submarine lights out into the water, you'll notice that it isn't completely clear. The water is filled with thousands of tiny white flakes slowly drifting downward. It looks exactly like a gentle snowstorm. This is called marine snow, and it's the only reason anything is alive in the trench. At the surface of the ocean, the food web starts with the sun. Sunlight feeds the algae, small fish eat the algae, and big fish eat the small fish. Down here, there's no sun, and absolutely zero new energy being created. The hadal zone runs purely on trash. Marine snow is basically just dead stuff from the surface slowly sinking to the bottom. It's a mix of dead algae, fish poop, and decaying flesh. Basically, if it's dead, gross, or rejected by the surface, it ends up here. When a whale dies at the surface, its massive body sinks, bringing a massive amount of food to the deep. But those big events are rare. Most of the time, the animals down here are just waiting for tiny flakes of garbage to drift down from 10 kilometers above. It can take weeks or even months for a single flake of marine snow to fall all the way from the surface to the trench. Tiny shrimp-like creatures called amphipods eat the snow. The snailfish eat the amphipods. Absolutely nothing goes to waste. The entire ecosystem of the Mariana Trench is just animals recycling the leftover garbage of the world above them. And eventually, all that snow lands somewhere. At 11,034 meters, we suddenly hear a loud bang. The submarine finally stops sinking. We reached the bottom of the ocean. Congratulations, you are now one of 28 people who have reached the Challenger Deep, the absolute lowest point on the surface of the Earth. After descending through glowing monsters, freezing temperatures, and a terrifying amount of pressure, what you now find here is a plastic bag? Yes, even our trash has reached all the way to the bottom of the ocean, floating exactly like marine snow would, except that it's not biodegradable. A plastic bag reached the Challenger Deep before a human did. Besides that though, everything else is just mud. A whole lot of flat, grey mud. The bottom of the world is a completely flat wasteland. Because marine snow and sediment have been raining down on this trench for millions of years, the bottom is coated in a thick layer of mud. There are no rocks. There are no underwater mountains. It's just a freezing desert. The water here is so still that if you disturb the mud with your submarine's thrusters, the cloud of dust would hang in the water for days before finally settling back down. It's an incredibly lonely place. And just sitting here, looking at this flat mud, it's easy to forget how completely insane it is that you're even alive to see it. We just spent this entire journey casually talking about dropping down to the Challenger Deep, as if it were just a long elevator ride. When engineers build a spacecraft to go to the moon, they only have to deal with the pressure difference of 1 atmosphere. The vacuum of space has 0 pressure, and inside of the ship has 1 atmosphere of pressure to keep the astronauts breathing. They just have to keep that 1 atmosphere of pressure in. Down here, the engineers have to keep 1,000 atmospheres of pressure out. If a spacecraft springs a tiny leak, it's an emergency, but the astronauts have time to patch it or put on suits. If a deep sea sub has a flaw the size of a human hair, the entire vehicle implodes in a millisecond. This is why, for decades, more human beings had walked on the surface of the moon than had visited the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It's a place that humans really aren't supposed to be. So that's it. The absolute bottom. The end of the line for life on Earth. Or is it? You prepare to drop your ballast weights and begin the long, hours-long ascent back to the surface. You take one last look at the mud beneath you. For a long time, scientists believed that the Challenger Deep was the final boundary. Once you hit the dirt, biology stops and geology begins. But recently, researchers started taking core samples of the rocks and mud deep beneath the floor of the trench, and they found something that shouldn't even be possible. They found microbes living inside the rocks, nearly 10 kilometers beneath the ocean floor. These organisms survive purely by eating the raw minerals and chemicals created by the tectonic plates grinding together. They're completely cut off from the surface world. If the surface of the world got hit by a giant asteroid tomorrow, these microbes wouldn't even notice. They'd just keep munching on rocks, completely unbothered. If life can exist inside the rocks beneath the deepest point on Earth, is it possible there's something somehow deeper? There could be hidden geological structures below the trench that we don't even know exist. It's cool to think about. Honestly, if something does exist, I don't think it's going to be a megalodon. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, you can check out my other video here about why squids get creepier the deeper you go. Ugh, finally, back at the surface.